these halftone screens. Before I start, I'm going to cue up, just like I did in class, I'm going to do a gradient, a transparency, and I've got this appearance menu. All right, these are the three we're going to work with. All right, so let me draw some shapes. Here's a square, and this square is filled with white. You can't have it be blank. It has to be filled, even if it's filled with white. So here's a square filled with white. Here's a circle. And we'll fill this with, I'm going to do 0, 0, 0, and then K, or black, is 50%. All right, I'm going to duplicate these. So let's start. If we go into Effect, and we go into Texture, and we go into Grain, and if we go into, where is it? Halftone Pattern. Now, there's a number of different halftone patterns that we can do. We can do circle. We can do dot, and I'm sure you've noticed that the dot is actually a square. We'll talk more about that in a second. Or we can do lines. All right, so let's do dot. So there is a halftone dot. All right, well, I'm going to do a different one here. Now this one is filled with 50% black. We start with a tone, and let's see what happens then. Again, we're going to do texture, grain, and we will do halftone pattern. And again, we're going to do dot, and what you'll notice is, depending on where you go with this, depending on how you do this, and depending on the contrast, so there's a different kind of halftone pattern. And the reason you're getting different types of halftone pattern has to do with the fill. So let's go into this one, and I'm going to make this 15% instead of 50%. So just a very light dot. And I go in, and I say texture, grain. So this is going to take a little bit of exploration. See how big that is? The patterns that are being created are based on the fill that's in that space. And then I can go in and I can arrange this. I can push the contrast up. Notice as I push the contrast up, the edges become crisper. All right. And then for this one, I think, just to show you what happens, I'll put in a blue tint. And again, effect, texture, grain. We'll do halftone pattern. And again, you can see, because there's some color in there, the squares aren't quite as sharp. So you can play with the size. All right? So different boxes create different ideas. And you can also just say, hey, and by the way, grain, halftone pattern. So if you wanted to, for example, you could do circles. You can do all kinds of things. And I really encourage you to go in and play around with these things. Now, if you wanted that to kind of vignette out to nothing, we would combine this then with the style that we used in class today. So, let me show you. This is what we want. We want transparency, and we want gradient to make this work. So, I am going to copy this. I'm going to paste it in front. So now we have two of them. But this particular one, I'm going to take away the halftone pattern. So now I have this one and this one. They're sitting directly on top of each other. And I'm going to add a gradient. Let's do that. All right. Let's assume that I want a radial gradient. I'm going to grab that gradient and I'm going to cut it. Edit, cut. And then I'm going to come over here to transparency. I'm going to say make the mask. And you'll notice the first thing that happens is that dot grain goes away. It's because it's being covered by this mask. So we click on the mask layer, we paste in front, and look, there's the mask, and there's the gradient, and it's moving in the opposite direction, so I do that. All right? And that's how you get your gradient. And here's the thing. If I click on this mask and I go to my gradient, and I make sure that this is selected, I can go in and edit the gradient. I can make it darker, I can make it lighter, I can change the angle, I can change the scale. Okay? So I think that's what you're asking. If I'm wrong and I got this wrong, can you please let me know? All right.